The emergency sirens wailed across Nexus Prime as Ambassador Krell rushed through the corridors of the Galactic Council chambers. His luminescent blue skin flickered with distress patterns as he clutched the latest battle reports in his six-fingered hands. The news was worse than anyone had imagined. Inside the Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from 12 different species sat in stunned silence. General Thymas of the Aquiland Defense Force stood at the center podium, his feathered crest drooping with exhaustion. Behind him, holographic displays showed the devastating reality of their situation. "The outer rim is gone," Thymas announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. 17 star systems completely destroyed in the past month. The Ravager horde isn't just conquering anymore, they're consuming everything in their path. Ambassador Krell moved to his designated speaking platform, his three eyes focusing on the assembled delegates. "My own homeworld of Villara fell 3 days ago. 2 billion souls reduced to nothing but ash and empty space. Our most advanced defense grids lasted exactly 47 minutes against their assault. The Zephyrian delegate, a tall insectoid, being named Vex, clicked his mandibles nervously. Our combined fleets have engaged them 7 times. Each battle ends the same way. They adapt to our weapons faster than we can deploy them. They learn our tactics and turn them against us." Minister Carl from the Silicon Worlds raised his crystalline hand. "The mathematical projections are clear. At their current rate of expansion, they will reach the core worlds within 6 months. Our entire civilization will cease to exist." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Alliance had maintained peace through diplomacy and mutual cooperation. War was something they studied in history archives, not something they practiced. The Ravager horde had changed everything. Dr. Nava, the chief xenorchaeologist, approached the central display with a datapad in her hands. "There might be one option we haven't considered. During my research into pre-contact civilizations, I discovered records of a species that might be able to help us." General Thymas looked skeptical. "What species could possibly stand against the Ravagers when our combined might has failed?" "They call themselves humans," Dr. Nava replied, activating a new holographic display. "They inhabit a small world called Earth in the Orion Arm, according to our long-range surveys. They're still a developing civilization, barely capable of interstellar travel." Ambassador Krell studied the display showing images of Earth and its inhabitants. The humans looked fragile compared to most galactic species, with their soft skin and limited physical capabilities. "What makes you think they could help us when our most advanced military forces cannot?" Dr. Nava highlighted several data points on the display. "Their history is unlike anything we've seen in the galaxy. For over 10,000 years, they've been engaged in almost continuous warfare against their own species. They've developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet multiple times over, yet somehow they've survived." The Corvan representative, a massive bear-like creature named Grok, growled softly. "Primitive barbarians fighting among themselves. Hardly seems relevant to our current crisis. But that's exactly what makes them unique," Dr. Nava continued. "Every other species in the galaxy developed space travel through cooperation and peaceful advancement. Humans achieved it while actively trying to destroy each other. They understand warfare in ways we cannot comprehend." Vex's compound eyes focused on the human military footage. "These weapons they've created, they seem designed specifically for killing other humans. That level of interspecies aggression is almost unprecedented in galactic history." Minister Carl processed the data through his quantum matrix mind. "The energy signatures from their nuclear weapons indicate destructive capability far beyond their technological level. They've achieved maximum lethality with minimal resources." General Thymas studied the tactical information. "They're military. Doctrine appears to be based on something they call total war. The concept involves targeting not just enemy forces, but their entire support structure, civilian populations, and economic systems." Ambassador Krell felt a chill run through his photosynthetic cells. "That sounds remarkably similar to Ravager tactics." Exactly, Dr. Nava said. The difference is that humans developed these strategies through necessity, not conquest. They've learned to fight like predators because they've had to survive against other predators for millennia. The chamber erupted in debate as delegates discussed the implications. Some argued that seeking help from such a violent species was dangerous. Others pointed out that conventional approaches had already failed completely. Elder Zarn of the Mystic Consortium raised his ancient voice above the chaos. We face extinction. Our children, our cultures, our entire way of life will be erased if we do nothing. Perhaps it is time to embrace solutions that make us uncomfortable. The vote was called, and one by one, each species cast their decision. The margin was narrow, but the result was clear. They would contact Earth and request military assistance. Ambassador Krell was chosen to craft the formal message. He spent hours composing what he hoped would be an appeal to human compassion and nobility. The final transmission read, "To the noble warriors of Earth, we humbly request your aid in our darkest hour. A terrible enemy threatens to destroy all life in our galaxy. We seek saviors, peacekeepers who can help us protect the innocent and preserve civilization itself. Please send us your finest champions, your most honorable defenders, those who fight for justice and mercy." The message was broadcast across space using the most powerful transmitters in the Alliance. As it traveled toward the distant Orion arm, the delegates could only wait and hope that these mysterious humans would prove worthy of their desperate faith. 3 days later, a response arrived. It was brief and direct. Message received and understood. Threat assessment complete. Military deployment authorized under Emergency Protocol 7. Expect arrival of advanced forces in 72 standard hours. Prepare detailed intelligence. Briefings on enemy capabilities and current tactical situation. Earth Defense Command sends regards. The tone of the reply surprised many delegates. There was no mention of peace negotiations or humanitarian concerns. Instead, the humans seemed to view the situation as a military problem requiring a military solution. Dr. Nava reviewed the response with growing unease. Emergency Protocol 7 suggests they have pre-existing plans for this type of scenario. That level of preparedness implies they've considered galactic warfare before we even contacted them. General Thymus found himself both relieved and worried. At least they're taking the threat seriously, but their language suggests they're approaching this as soldiers rather than peacekeepers. As the hours passed and Earth's arrival time approached, monitoring stations detected massive energy signatures emerging from hyperspace near the edge of their system. The human fleet was larger than expected, and their ships registered power levels that seemed excessive for a rescue mission. Ambassador Krell stood at the observation deck, watching the approaching vessels through the reinforced viewing panels. The ships were dark and angular, designed for function rather than beauty. They moved with predatory precision, maintaining perfect formation as they closed the distance to Nexus Prime. "I hope we've made the right choice," he whispered to himself, remembering the desperate vote that had brought these warriors to their doorstep. The galaxy's fate now rested in the hands of a species they barely understood, whose own history was written in blood and conflict. As the first human transport prepared to dock with the station, Krell realized that everything was about to change. They had asked for saviors, but something told him they were about to discover what Earth really sent when the galaxy called for help. The docking bay of Nexus Prime had never hosted such an ominous arrival. Ambassador Krell stood with the welcoming committee as the massive human transport ship connected to the station. The airlock cycled open with a sharp hiss, and what emerged defied every expectation the aliens had harbored about their supposed saviors. Captain Marcus Stone stepped through the threshold first, his combat boots echoing against the metal floor with mechanical precision. He was tall for a human, his face marked by scars that spoke of violence survived. Behind him came Colonel Elena Rodriguez, her dark eyes scanning the reception area with the calculating gaze of a predator assessing potential threats. The aliens had prepared a ceremonial welcome with traditional flowers and peaceful greetings. Captain Stone ignored the offered blossoms entirely, his attention focused on the tactical layout of the docking bay. "Security seems adequate," he commented to Rodriguez, "but those ventilation shafts could be problematic if we need to lock this place down." Ambassador Krell stepped forward, his luminescent skin displaying patterns of welcome and gratitude. "Captain Stone, we cannot express how grateful we are for your arrival. We had hoped you might bring advisors to help us develop peaceful solutions to this crisis." Stone looked at the ambassador with genuine confusion. "Peaceful solutions? You described a genocidal enemy that's already killed billions of your people." "There's only one solution to genocide, Ambassador, and it isn't peaceful." The human soldiers continued filing out of the transport, each one carrying equipment that looked far too advanced for what the aliens expected. Their weapons were compact but clearly designed for maximum lethality, and their armor bore the marks of actual combat experience. Colonel Rodriguez approached General Thymus, who had expected to discuss evacuation procedures and defensive strategies. Instead, she immediately began asking disturbing questions. How do these Ravagers reproduce? Do they have industrial centers we can target? What's their command structure like? Are there any rules of engagement we need to follow, or is this a total war scenario? Thymus felt his feathered crest flatten against his head. "We were hoping you could help us establish communication with them, perhaps find a diplomatic solution." Rodriguez laughed, a sound that sent chills through the assembled aliens. "Ambassador, diplomatic solutions work when both sides want to live. Your reports indicate they've been systematically exterminating entire species. You don't negotiate with that, you eliminate it." The cultural disconnect became more apparent as the humans continued their assessment. Dr. Nava tried to explain their peaceful philosophies and their belief in the sanctity of all life. Captain Stone listened politely, then responded with clinical detachment. "Dr. Nava, I appreciate your idealism, but you've never faced an existential threat like this." "We have. For thousands of years, humans have dealt with enemies who wanted to erase us completely. We learned that some conflicts can't be resolved through understanding, only through superior firepower." Minister Carl attempted to engage the humans in discussions about preserving galactic civilization and maintaining moral standards during the conflict. The response from Lieutenant Commander Beth Hayes was unsettling. "Minister, we'll preserve your civilization by destroying anything that threatens it. As for moral standards, we'll use whatever methods are necessary to ensure our enemies can never threaten innocent life again. Sometimes being moral means being absolutely ruthless to those who aren't." The aliens watched with growing alarm as the humans set up their command center. Instead of defensive planning, they immediately began requesting intelligence on Ravager home systems, supply lines, and breeding colonies. Their questions revealed a mindset focused not on protection, but on total annihilation of the threat. Major Tom Hayes addressed the assembled alien leadership with shocking directness. "We've reviewed your military reports, and frankly, you've been fighting this war all wrong. You've been treating this like a territorial dispute when it's actually a survival scenario. The Ravagers aren't interested in conquest, they want extinction. Our approach will match that level of commitment." Ambassador Krell felt his worst fears beginning to materialize. "Major Hayes, surely there must be some way to resolve this without descending to their level of brutality." Hayes fixed the ambassador with a stare that seemed to peer into his soul. "Ambassador, we're not descending to their level. We're going several levels below it. The difference is, we'll stop when the threat is eliminated. They won't stop until everything is dead." The human military personnel moved through the station like apex predators, their every action calculated and efficient. They studied structural plans not for defensive purposes, but to identify weak points and killing fields. Their conversations focused on topics that made the peaceful aliens deeply uncomfortable. The docking bay could be rigged for controlled demolition if we need to deny them access, one soldier mentioned casually to another. Standard procedure would be to evacuate non-essential personnel and establish overlapping fields of fire at all entry points. Colonel Rodriguez gathered the alien military leaders for what they hoped would be a strategy session about protecting their worlds. Instead, she presented them with intelligence requirements that revealed the true nature of human warfare. "We Need detailed scans of every Ravager vessel you've encountered? Not for defensive analysis, but to identify structural weaknesses we can exploit during boarding actions. We also need information about their atmospheric requirements, nutritional needs, and psychological profiles. Everything that can be used against them. The aliens began to realize they had made a fundamental error in their understanding of human nature. They had assumed that any species capable of space travel would share their values of peaceful coexistence and rational discourse. The humans seemed to view the universe as an inherently hostile place where survival required constant vigilance and overwhelming force. General Thymus attempted one final appeal to human mercy. Captain Stone, these Ravagers may be misguided, but surely they're still living beings worthy of some consideration. Stone's response crystallized the aliens' growing horror. General, when someone breaks into your home and starts killing your family, you don't consider their feelings. You stop them by any means necessary. The Ravagers declared war on existence itself. We're simply going to finish what they started. As the briefing concluded, the aliens overheard conversations between human soldiers that revealed the true scope of their intentions. Terms like scorched earth protocol, psychological warfare operations, and total resource denial suggested approaches to warfare that went far beyond anything the galactic community had ever considered. Ambassador Krell found himself questioning whether they had made a terrible mistake. They had asked for saviors, beings who would protect the innocent and preserve life. Instead, they seemed to have summoned something far more dangerous than the threat they faced. The humans finished their initial assessment and began preparing for deployment to the front lines. Their equipment was loaded with an efficiency that spoke of extensive combat experience, and their demeanor suggested they were looking forward to the coming battle. As Captain Stone prepared to depart for the first engagement zone, he turned to address the alien leadership one final time. His words would haunt them for cycles to come. You called for help because you were facing extinction. We answered because we understand extinction better than any species in the galaxy. The Ravagers think they're the ultimate predators. They're about to learn what real predators look like. The transport ships departed with their human cargo, leaving the aliens to contemplate what they had unleashed upon the galaxy. They had wanted champions of justice and mercy, but instead they had summoned something that seemed to relish the prospect of total war. As the human fleet moved toward the battle zone, Ambassador Krell couldn't shake the feeling that they had traded one nightmare for another. The question now was whether the cure would prove worse than the disease. The mining colony of Epsilon 7 looked like any other frontier settlement from orbit, its industrial structures scattered across the barren landscape like metal seeds waiting to grow. What the approaching Ravager fleet couldn't detect were the modifications the humans had made during their 3-day preparation period. Captain Stone stood in the underground command center, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. Sensor network is fully operational, Colonel. Every approach vector is covered, and our hunter-killer teams are in position. Colonel Rodriguez studied the incoming enemy formation through the periscope feeds. The Ravager ships were massive bioorganic constructs that looked more like diseased organs than spacecraft. Their hulls pulsed with arterial channels, and weapon pods sprouted from their surfaces like malignant growths. Estimated enemy strength is 47 vessels, reported Lieutenant Hayes from the communications station. Mixed assault configuration. Heavy onboarding craft. They're following their standard pattern, expecting minimal resistance. The alien observers monitoring the situation from their distant command ships felt their hopes sink as they watched the overwhelming enemy force approach. Ambassador Krell opened a communication channel to the human command center. Captain Stone, perhaps you should consider withdrawing your forces. The enemy numbers are far too great for effective resistance. Stone's response came through clearly, tinged with what sounded almost like amusement. Ambassador, you're thinking like prey. We're not here to resist. We're here to hunt. The surface defenses of Epsilon 7 appeared pathetically inadequate as the Ravager fleet entered the atmosphere. A few scattered gun emplacements and some basic energy shields that flickered weakly under the first enemy bombardment. The human response seemed feeble and disorganized, exactly what the Ravagers had come to expect from their previous conquests. Major Hayes coordinated the surface teams from his concealed position. All units remember the engagement profile. Make them think they're winning until they're completely committed. No one breaks cover until Phase 2 initiation. The first wave of Ravager dropships landed unopposed, disgorging their horrifying cargo of warrior drones across the colony grounds. These creatures were nightmares made flesh, with razor-sharp claws, acidic secretions, and a hunger for destruction that had terrorized the galaxy. The few visible human defenders fell back in apparent panic, abandoning their positions as the aliens watched in despair. It seemed like another inevitable massacre was about to unfold, but then the real battle began. Explosions erupted from within the Ravager ranks as carefully placed charges detonated with perfect timing. The devices had been implanted in the landing zones during the humans' preparation phase, designed to activate when enemy biosignatures reached optimal density. From concealed positions that shouldn't have existed, human soldiers emerged like deadly shadows. They moved through the chaos with inhuman precision, their weapons firing exotic ammunition that seemed specifically designed to counter. Ravager biology, Sergeant Tim Cross led his squad in their first close-quarters engagement, and the aliens, watching the battle feeds, couldn't believe what they were seeing. The humans didn't fight like civilized beings following rules of engagement. They fought like apex predators, using every advantage and exploiting every weakness. Neural disruptor rounds are effective against their central nervous systems, Cross reported over the tactical network, confirming that the electromagnetic pulse grenades interfere with their coordination systems. Recommend switching to Protocol 7 for maximum psychological impact. The Ravager forces, accustomed to easy victories against panicked enemies, found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. The humans didn't just resist. They counterattacked with strategies that seemed to anticipate every Ravager move. Colonel Rodriguez monitored the engagement from the command center, making real-time adjustments to their tactics. Team 3, execute flanking maneuver Delta. Team 7, initiate the terror protocol on the northern perimeter. Make sure some of them escape to report back. The aliens observing the battle were horrified by what they heard. The humans weren't just fighting to win. They were deliberately allowing some enemies to survive so they could spread fear among the Ravager ranks. In orbit, the Ravager command ship received increasingly frantic reports from the surface forces. Their warrior drones, bred for millennia to be the perfect killing machines, were being systematically slaughtered by creatures they had dismissed as weak prey animals. Captain Stone activated the Phase 2 protocols as planned. All units switch to active hunting mode. Show them what human warfare really looks like. The hidden human positions revealed themselves simultaneously, creating a killing field that trapped the remaining Ravager forces in a carefully orchestrated death trap. But the most disturbing aspect wasn't the efficiency of the slaughter. It was the methodical way the humans went about it. They didn't kill randomly or in rage. Every action was calculated for maximum effect, both tactically and psychologically. Bodies were arranged in specific patterns, warning messages were carved into Ravager equipment using their own acidic blood, and selected survivors were marked with human symbols before being released. Lieutenant Commander Hayes led the first boarding action against a Ravager support vessel, and the aliens watching the feeds had to close their optical sensors. The humans moved through the enemy ship like a plague, adapting to alien technology in real time, and turning the Ravager's own weapons against them. Bioship neural interface located and compromised, Hayes reported with clinical detachment. Uploading virus payload to their navigation systems. This ship will carry our little gift back to their fleet. The virus was a human creation designed specifically for Ravager biotechnology. It wouldn't kill immediately, but it would slowly corrupt their ship systems while broadcasting human psychological warfare messages directly into their collective consciousness. Ambassador Krell watched the tactical displays with growing horror as the impossible happened. The overwhelming Ravager force was being systematically destroyed by a much smaller human contingent, and the methods being used were more terrifying than anything the Ravagers themselves had ever employed. The final phase of the battle involved something the humans called cleanup operations. The aliens expected this to mean medical aid and prisoner processing. Instead, they witnessed the methodical elimination of every trace of Ravager presence on the planet. The humans didn't take prisoners. They didn't leave wounded enemies. They didn't allow any evidence that the Ravagers had ever been there, except for the carefully planted psychological warfare materials, designed to terrorize any future invasion forces. Captain Stone emerged from the underground command center as the last enemy vessel fled the system. His uniform was spotless, his demeanor calm and professional. To the aliens monitoring the situation, he looked like someone who had just completed a routine training exercise rather than a desperate battle for survival. Phase 1 complete, he reported to the alien command ship. Enemy force neutralized, with minimal human casualties. Psychological warfare protocol successfully implemented. Recommend proceeding to Phase 2 operations immediately. General Thymas opened a communication channel, his voice shaking with disturbed fascination. Captain Stone, what exactly is Phase 2? Stone's response sent chills through every alien who heard it. Phase 2 is when we stop playing defense and start hunting them on their own territory. This was just a demonstration of human capabilities, General. The real war is about to begin. As the human forces prepared to depart Epsilon 7, they left behind a planet that looked exactly as it had before the attack. No evidence of the battle remained except for the carefully crafted psychological warfare materials scattered throughout the system. The aliens realized with dawning horror that they had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans hadn't just won a battle, they had made it look effortless while simultaneously sending a message that would spread terror throughout the Ravager collective consciousness. Colonel Rodriguez addressed the alien observers one final time before the human fleet departed for their next objective. This is how humans fight when our survival is threatened. We don't just defeat our enemies, we make them afraid to ever threaten us again. The Ravagers wanted to play extinction games with the galaxy. Now they get to learn why humans are still alive after 10,000 years of warfare. The human ships disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the aliens to contemplate what they had unleashed upon their enemies. They had asked for protection, but what they received was something far more dangerous, a species that had turned warfare into an art form perfected through millennia of a violent evolution. The Ravager response came faster and more viciously than anyone had anticipated. Within hours of receiving reports from the Epsilon 7 survivors, their massive war fleets began a systematic campaign of total destruction against every world that had accepted human protection. Ambassador Krell watched the incoming reports with growing dread as colony after colony went silent. The agricultural world of Harmony's Rest, home to 50 million peaceful farmers, was reduced to a lifeless husk in less than 6 hours. The research station at Nebula's edge, containing the galaxy's most advanced scientific libraries, was consumed entirely, leaving nothing but empty space. They're not just destroying military targets anymore, reported Dr. Nava, her voice trembling as she processed the intelligence feeds. They're systematically eradicating every trace of civilization they can find. It's as if they're trying to send a message that allying with humans means certain death. General Thymas stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, his feathered crest dark with stress hormones. The Ravagers have deployed their reserve fleets. We estimate they now have over 10,000 vessels actively engaged in extermination operations. They seem determined to punish the entire galaxy for our decision to contact Earth. The assembled delegates sat in stunned silence as the scope of the catastrophe became clear. By seeking human help, they had triggered a response that threatened to destroy everything they had tried to save. Minister Carl's crystalline structure flickered with computational overload as he processed the data. The mathematical projections are catastrophic. At this rate of destruction, Galactic civilization will cease to exist within 30 standard days. Ambassador Krell activated the emergency communication system, desperate to reach the human forces. Captain Stone, we need to discuss an immediate ceasefire. The Ravagers are destroying everything. Perhaps we should consider surrender negotiations. The response from Earth's military command came not from Captain Stone, but from someone whose voice carried even more authority. Fleet Admiral Sarah Chan's image appeared on the main display, her expression cold and calculating. Ambassador, I'm afraid you've misunderstood the nature of this conflict. The Ravagers just declared total war on galactic civilization. We consider that a direct threat to Earth's long-term security interests. Admiral Chun's next words sent chills through the alien leadership. As of this moment, Earth Defense Command is authorizing the deployment of our deep strike fleets. The Ravagers want to play extinction games? We invented extinction games? The communication ended abruptly, leaving the aliens to wonder what they had just heard. Dr. Nava pulled up Earth's military records, and what she found made her photosynthetic cells freeze with terror. The deep strike fleets, she whispered. According to our intelligence, these are Earth's most advanced military units. They're specifically designed for what humans call total warfare scenarios. Their mission profiles include something called complete threat neutralization. If summoned by their fears, massive energy signatures began appearing throughout the galaxy. Human ships emerged from hyperspace not in dozens but in thousands. These vessels were different from the earlier arrivals, sleeker and more ominous, carrying weapon systems that registered power levels beyond anything the aliens had previously observed. Commander Jake Morrison materialized on their communication screen, his appearance more disturbing than the previous human officers they had encountered. His eyes held a predatory gleam, and his smile suggested someone who genuinely enjoyed the prospect of violence. "Greetings from the Ghost Battalion," Morrison said, his tone conversational despite the terrifying implications. "We've been studying your Ravager problem, and I'm pleased to report that we've identified comprehensive solutions." Ambassador Krell found his voice despite his growing horror. "Commander Morrison, surely there must be some way to resolve this without further escalation. The destruction is already beyond imagination." Morrison's laugh was a sound that would haunt the aliens' dreams for years to come. "Ambassador, the Ravagers made their choice when they decided to punish innocent civilians for seeking help. Now, they get to live with the consequences of threatening human-protected territories." The human strategy became clear as their fleets moved into position throughout the galaxy. Instead of defending specific locations, they were implementing something they called deep penetration strikes against Ravager supply lines, command centers, and what the humans clinically referred to as population concentration areas. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos addressed the alien leadership from the bridge of her assault carrier. "We've analyzed Ravager logistics networks and identified critical vulnerabilities in their expansion strategy. Our mission is to systematically dismantle their ability to sustain offensive operations." The aliens watched in fascinated horror as human forces began operations that defied every principle of civilized warfare. They didn't just attack military targets, they went after the infrastructure that supported Ravager society itself. Breeding colonies that had never seen combat suddenly found themselves under assault by human forces that moved like lethal shadows through their biological citadels. Manufacturing centers producing Ravager weapons disappeared in precisely calculated explosions that left surrounding areas completely untouched. Commander Morrison's unit specialized in what they called psychological architecture destruction. They didn't just destroy Ravager facilities, they did it in ways specifically designed to create maximum fear and confusion among the enemy population. "Fear is a weapon like any other," Morrison explained during one of his tactical briefings. "The Ravagers have used terror to control the galaxy for decades. Time to show them what real terror looks like when professionals apply it." The humans demonstrated an disturbing ability to learn and adapt to Ravager technology faster than the Ravagers themselves could deploy it. Every new weapon, every tactical innovation, Every biological advantage the enemy possessed was quickly analyzed, understood, and turned against them. Captain Stone reappeared during the third week of operations, his report to the alien leadership, delivered with clinical detachment. Enemy command structure has been compromised through targeted elimination of leadership hierarchies. Their communication networks are corrupted with human-designed viral programs. Supply chains have been severed at 47 critical junctions. General Thymus struggled to comprehend the scope of human operations. Captain, how many Ravager systems have your forces engaged simultaneously? Stone's answer revealed the true scale of human military capability. Currently active operations span approximately 2,000 star systems. Our advanced reconnaissance teams have already penetrated their core territories and begun preliminary target assessment for final phase operations. The aliens realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans weren't just fighting a defensive war, they were systematically dismantling an entire species' ability to threaten anyone ever again. Dr. Nava reviewed the tactical reports with growing unease. Their methods are effective, but they're also completely ruthless. They're not just defeating the Ravagers, they're eliminating them as a viable threat to future galactic stability. The most disturbing aspect of human operations was their apparent enjoyment of the work. Unlike the peaceful species of the galaxy, who viewed warfare as a tragic necessity, the humans seemed to approach it as a complex problem requiring elegant solutions. Commander Morrison's final report before the assault on the Ravager home systems was delivered with obvious satisfaction. Enemy morale has collapsed across all fronts. Their expansion operations have been completely halted. Remaining forces are retreating toward their core territories in what appears to be a desperate attempt to establish final defensive positions. Admiral Chun's image appeared on the main display as the human fleets prepared for their final offensive. Her words would define the new reality of galactic civilization. The Ravagers wanted to teach the galaxy about extinction through terror and overwhelming force. They succeeded in teaching us something important about the nature of existential threats. Now we're going to teach them why Earth has remained unconquered for 10,000 years of warfare. As the massive human armada prepared to jump into hyperspace for the final assault, Ambassador Krell realized that the galaxy would never be the same. They had summoned saviors to protect them from one nightmare, only to discover that their protectors might be an even more terrifying force. The question was no longer whether the humans could defeat the Ravagers. The question was what kind of galaxy would remain when the humans finished reshaping it according to their own brutal standards of permanent security. The final human armada assembled at the edge of Ravager space was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Over 15,000 vessels arranged in perfect formation, their combined firepower capable of sterilizing entire star systems. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the flagship Retribution, studying the tactical displays with cold satisfaction. Ambassador Krell and the other alien observers watched from their monitoring ships, positioned at what they hoped was a safe distance from the coming battle. The Ravager home system lay before them, protected by defensive installations that had never been seriously challenged in over a century of galactic expansion. All fleet units report ready for final assault, announced Captain Stone from his position aboard the assault carrier Vengeance. Enemy defensive grid shows approximately 8,000 vessels and orbital defense platforms. They've concentrated everything they have left. The alien observers expected a prolonged siege, perhaps negotiations, certainly some attempt at communication before the final battle. Instead, Admiral Chen's orders were delivered with brutal simplicity. All units, execute Operation Endgame. No prisoners, no mercy, no quarter. The Ravager species has forfeited its right to exist through systematic genocide. Today we finish what they started. The human fleet moved forward with terrifying coordination, each ship precisely positioned to maximize the effectiveness of their assault. But what disturbed the aliens most was the complete absence of hesitation or regret in the human advance. Commander, Morrison led the first wave aboard his stealth destroyer Shadow's Edge, penetrating deep into enemy territory before the main force engaged. His mission was to eliminate Ravager command and control systems, ensuring that their final defeat would be absolute and irreversible. Target acquisition complete, Morrison reported, as his ship materialized inside the enemy defensive perimeter. Beginning systematic destruction of enemy coordination networks. Estimated completion time is 47 minutes. The Ravagers responded with desperate fury, throwing everything they had at the invading human forces. Their bio-organic weapons, evolved over millions of years of conquest, seemed impressive until they encountered human technology specifically designed to counter biological warfare. Lieutenant Colonel Santos commanded the boarding operations against the massive Ravager hive ships, leading her Marines through alien corridors that pulsed with malevolent life. But instead of the terror such environments should have inspired, the humans moved through them like antibodies cleansing an infection. Hive consciousness nodes located and neutralized, Santos reported with clinical efficiency. Biological weapons. Production facilities have been sterilized. Moving to secure the genetic archives for complete destruction. The aliens watching the battle realized they were witnessing something beyond mere warfare. The humans weren't just defeating their enemies. They were systematically erasing every trace of Ravager civilization with the thoroughness of a surgical procedure. Captain Stone's assault teams penetrated the primary Ravager breeding complexes, facilities that had produced the warrior drones responsible for countless atrocities across the galaxy. What they found there would have horrified any other species, but the humans approached it as simply another tactical objective. Breeding facilities secured, Stone reported. Genetic templates for warrior drone production have been corrupted beyond recovery. Implementing Protocol Final Solution as authorized. Protocol Final Solution was something the aliens had hoped never to hear about. It represented the complete biological warfare capability that humans had developed during their own species' darker periods. Refined and perfected for use against non-human threats, the Ravager homeworld itself began to convulse as human ground. Forces established control over key population centers. But instead of the massacre the aliens expected, they witnessed something far more disturbing. The complete transformation of Ravager society according to human specifications. Major Beth Turner led the occupation forces through the primary Ravager cities, implementing what humans called social restructuring protocols. The surviving Ravager population wasn't being exterminated. They were being fundamentally altered to ensure they could never again pose a threat to galactic civilization. Behavioral modification programs are showing expected results, Turner reported. Aggressive tendencies are being successfully suppressed through a combination of genetic therapy and psychological conditioning. The subject population will be suitable for supervised reintegration within 18 months. Dr. Nava watched the reports with growing horror as she realized what the humans were doing. They're not just conquering the Ravagers, she whispered. They're remaking them into something completely different. The final phase of the operation involved something the humans called permanent threat elimination. Every Ravager facility capable of producing weapons, every research installation that could develop new technologies, every cultural center that might preserve their warrior traditions was systematically identified and destroyed. Admiral Chion addressed the alien observers as the operation neared completion. The Ravager threat to galactic civilization has been permanently neutralized. Their ability to wage aggressive warfare has been eliminated at the genetic, technological, and cultural levels. Ambassador Krell found his voice despite his overwhelming sense of dread. Admiral, what have you done to them? They were a living species, whatever their crimes. Chion's response revealed the true nature of human justice when applied to existential threats. Ambassador, they chose extinction when they decided to practice genocide against peaceful civilizations. We simply gave them a choice between their own extinction and the extinction of their capacity for violence. The surviving Ravager leadership was brought before the human command staff for final processing. These beings who had once terrorized the galaxy now cowered before creatures they had dismissed as weak prey animals, Commander Morrison addressed the Ravager High Dominarch with casual contempt. Your species committed genocide against innocent civilizations. Under human law, that carries a very specific penalty. You can accept complete behavioral modification and live as productive members of galactic society, or you can choose the alternative. The alternative was something the humans didn't need to explain in detail. The complete sterilization of the Ravager home system remained a viable option if the survivors refused to accept human authority. Captain Stone implemented the final security measures as human forces, established permanent monitoring stations throughout former Ravager territory. Observation posts are operational. Any attempt to resume aggressive activities will trigger automatic response protocols. The aliens realized they were witnessing the birth of a new galactic order, one where humans served as the ultimate arbiters of acceptable behavior. The peaceful civilizations had been saved, but at the cost of their innocence about the nature of protection. Admiral Chun's final message to the Galactic Council established the terms of this new reality. The Ravager threat has been eliminated permanently. Earth Defense Command will maintain monitoring stations throughout this region to ensure compliance with galactic peace standards. Ambassador Krell struggled to find appropriate words for what he had witnessed. Admiral, we asked for saviors to protect us from extinction. But what you've done here, it's changed everything. Chion's response would define humanity's role in galactic civilization for generations to come. Ambassador, you faced a species that wanted to exterminate all other life in the galaxy. We gave you the only kind of salvation possible against that. Level of threat, permanent security through overwhelming force. The human fleets began their withdrawal from Ravager space, leaving behind a carefully constructed network of monitoring stations and orbital platforms. The message was clear to any future threats. Defying human-protected space would result in consequences beyond imagination. As the alien observers prepared to return to their homeworlds, they carried with them the knowledge that the galaxy now had guardians who were more dangerous than any threat they might face. The humans had indeed saved galactic civilization, but they had also transformed it forever. Dr. Nava's final report to the Galactic Council captured the essence of their new reality. We summoned warriors to save us from monsters, only to discover that our saviors were more terrifying than the monsters themselves. The question now is whether we can live with the peace they've given us. The galaxy was safe, but it was a safety purchased with the complete transformation of galactic power structures. Humanity had answered the call for help, but their definition of help included permanently altering the nature of interstellar relations. As the human ships disappeared into hyperspace, returning to their distant patrol routes, the aliens were left to contemplate the price of survival. They had wanted champions of justice and mercy, but what they received was something far more effective and infinitely more dangerous. The age of peaceful galactic civilization was over. The age of human protection had begun, bringing with it a security that was absolute, permanent, and utterly terrifying in its implications for any species that might threaten the peace humans had established through superior firepower and unwavering determination.